take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Friday, November 6, 2020, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the program, the return after a 2.5-year hiatus of the Russ Belville Show and Toker Talk Radio. We're coming to you live from beautiful, legal Onionville in Tragic County, Oregon, right on the border of Mordor, looking across the field at the hills of Idaho, where possession of a hemp leaf, people, can still get you a free ride in a cop car. We're going to talk about that a little bit in the middle of this first hour. Idaho is now America's last absolute marijuana prohibition state. That's because South Dakota went and legalized on their first try, legalized marijuana and medical marijuana. We're going to be bringing you the marijuana election night rundown. That's coming up in our Behind the Headlines as we take a look at what I'm calling Kevin Sabet's worst night ever. Yes, Kevin Sabet, the founder of Project SAM, the smart approaches to marijuana use, except legalization, went 0 for 5, 0 for 6. It just depends on how you count these measures. If we're, he's just a marijuana guy, but, I'm going to include mushrooms and drug decriminalization as losses for him as well. So we'll get to all that in Behind the Headlines. Also, we're going to take a look at something I call the stupid marijuana costs argument. I can't believe they're still making it here in 2020, but they're still making the argument that legalizing marijuana will cost more in public health and safety than it will bring in tax revenue. Funny, I just read the other day that Illinois is bringing in $1 billion in sales, or Massachusetts was $1 billion. One of them's $500 million, the other one's so many billions of dollars in marijuana anymore. I can't keep track of which states got it, but I'll tell you, we'll bring that to you coming up a little bit later in the show. Also, in the Radical Rant, we're going to take a little melding of marijuana politics and national politics. As of this show right now, 4 p.m. Mountain Time on Friday, Joe Biden is in the lead in the critical states of Nevada, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. Looks to be becoming the next president of the United States. Drug War Joe going to be our president, and Kamala, the prosecutor, is going to be our vice president. So we'll see how that turns out. I think after the last 4 years, it can't get worse, can it? I don't know. But we'll talk about that in our Radical Rant. Will 15 legal marijuana states finally convince Democrats to get on board with vocally supporting marijuana legalization? Narrator says, probably not. Also, we'll have Toker Talk Radio coming up in our second hour. We'll take a deep dive into, well, first of all, what's up with me? What's changed in this past 2.5 years, and why am I back behind the mic? But also, we're going to take a look at the second big win for a good friend of mine, Anthony Johnson, who's a total mensch. He's such a great guy. He was behind the Measure 91 campaign to legalize marijuana here in the state of Oregon. Now, he had lost before that. He had a Measure 74 campaign that we had done to try to get medical marijuana dispensaries. Boy, those were the days back when we were trembling over whether or not we could sell marijuana to sick people. We actually failed with Measure 74, but then he was undeterred, came back with Measure 91. We legalized, and then now he's behind Measure 110, the drug decriminalization measure. So I'm going to take a look at Oregon statute and tell you how much drugs can you have on your person in the state of Oregon now, or soon, and not get arrested. It's just world-changing, this initiative that has taken place here in the state of Oregon. And also, I'll take a look at some of the tweets that have been going around this week on the Radical Russ account. You can find me, Radical Russ, online at Twitter and Facebook and all sorts of places. So, hope you'll join us. Also doing some new programming here, so might have to dial some things in a little bit. Got all sorts of new music clips and comedy for you as well.
You're tuned into the Russ
If you work in the
Belville
cannabis
Show,
industry,
the
consume
voice
marijuana,
of the
or just
marijuana
support
nation.
freedom, you need to know about breaking policy news that affects you. Marijuana Moment is the daily newsletter that helps you stay on top of all the latest and most important state, federal, and international cannabis developments. Brought to you by longtime legalization activist Tom Angel, Marijuana Moment puts a concise yet comprehensive overview of cannabis news in your inbox early every weekday morning. Wake up to Marijuana Moment and rest assured you'll be ready for the cannabis news that's driving the day. Subscribe now at marijuanamoment.net.
Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that.
Cool.
A public service message from the Russ Belville Show.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. I'm Russ Belville. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem says that the state's newly passed constitutional amendment legalizing marijuana for all adults was, quote, the wrong choice for South Dakota's communities, end quote. Governor Noem, a Republican, told the Argus leader, quote, we need to be finding ways to strengthen our families, and I think we're taking a step backward in that effort, end quote. The South Dakota Speaker of the House, Stephen Hoggard, also a Republican, says implementing the will of the voters may present some legislative challenges.
We really need to figure out if that constitutional amendment is sufficient in itself to clarify some of those issues. I suspect we're probably going to have some challenges to that because it is so long.
The constitutional amendment for adult use cannabis will make it so people 21 and older will be able to possess and distribute up to 1 ounce of marijuana, and they will be allowed to cultivate up to 3 cannabis plants. Upon formal passage, legalization will become the law on July 1st, 2021. The referendum to legalize cannabis in New Zealand has failed. Final election tallies released by the government show that 50.7% of New Zealanders voted against legalization, while 48.4% supported it. The election was held on October 17th, but final tallies had been delayed while all the votes were tabulated. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was re-elected to a second term in a landslide in that election. Ardern admitted that she voted yes for the legalization referendum, but had not publicly supported it or opposed it during the election campaign. However, during a debate with opposition leader Judith Collins, Ardern did admit to having inhaled in the past.
Judith Collins, have you ever used cannabis?
No, I have not.
Jacinda Ardern, have you ever used cannabis?
Yes, I did, a long time ago. I will be voting against the legalisation of the sale and recreational use of cannabis in our country. I want to protect the mental health, particularly of young people.
So you're voting no?
And I'm voting no.
I made a clear decision that I want the public of New Zealand to decide this, and I want this not to be about politics.
Yes or no, how are you voting in the referendum?
Answer.
And I'll be giving my answer after the election, after New Zealand has decided.
So you won't?
The smashing success of marijuana's sweep at the ballot box Tuesday has added momentum to nearby states' efforts to end adult marijuana prohibition. Democratic Governor of Connecticut, Ned Lamont, was asked on Wednesday about the prospects of legalizing marijuana for adult use in Connecticut, following nearby New Jersey's 2-to-1 approval of legalization. Lamont noted how he worked with Republican Governor Charlie Baker of Massachusetts, another nearby legal state, to coordinate a regional response to COVID, and that marijuana legalization should also be an issue to be solved regionally.
My thinking is sort of similar when it comes to marijuana. That I think if we do something, we do it on a regional basis. You're right, New Jersey has done this. Massachusetts is already legal. Rhode Island's looking at it. New York is looking at it. So I'll be talking with my fellow governors about what, if anything, we want to do on a regional basis, and then talking with the legislature as well.
In New York City, Democratic Mayor Bill de Blasio offered congratulations to New Jersey on its passage of legalization in his Wednesday media availability.
They did something really important and something New York State needs to do. They legalized marijuana. Now, this is something I believe in. It has to be done the right way in New York. It has to be done in a way that's safe and that empowers communities who often have suffered from the wrong kind of laws in the past. But here's an opportunity to do the right thing. We see it in New Jersey. Now it's time for New York State to do it. legalize marijuana the right way. Also, by the way, at a point where we need resources so we can serve people and provide such crucial services, this will be a big economic boost and bring in revenue we need. So hopefully that will soon be coming in this state as well.
The Democratic governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, told WAMC's Roundtable that the time for legalization in New York is now.
I think this year it is ripe because the state is going to be desperate for funding, even with Biden, even with the stimulus, even with everything else, we're still going to need funding. And it's also the right policy.
This has been your Cannabis Headline News. I'm Russ Belville.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
All right. Well, maybe you're high, too.
In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
In advertising, they say one of the surest ways to get your message across is to put celebrities in your commercial. We hope they're right.
This has been the Russ Belville Show's anti-drug public service announcement of the day, exclusively on RadicalRuss.com.
The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
All right, in the Cannabis Focus today, we're taking a look at the best night of marijuana and drug reform in U.S. history, and, of course, the worst night in Kevin Sabet's career. For those of you who are new to the show, you may not know, but Kevin Sabet is the founder of Project SAM. It's the Smart Approaches to Marijuana. I like to call it Project Samuel, Smart Approaches to Marijuana Use Except Legalization. And it was formed in the wake of legalization in Colorado and Washington state, and the idea being to provide a public face for the anti-legalization movement, but one that didn't succumb to the so-called reefer madness. So I always say that Kevin Sabet tries to play the Goldilocks game, to say that legalization is too soft, prohibition is too hard, but forcing people into drug rehab that they neither want nor need is just right. And it just so happens that's the position of the, I'm going to say, president-elect Joe Biden. He also believes in a decriminalization with punitive measures to force people into rehab. Hopefully, the will of the people, as expressed in this election, will convince him and his incoming administration for that not to be the case. And I do truly believe this is a transformative year as far as drug policy goes, most specifically because of the passage of Measure 110 here in the state of Oregon, decriminalizing the personal possession amounts of all drugs. All drugs, any drug. Think of a drug. Got it in your head? It's legal to carry. Well, it's not legal to carry that around, but you're not going to go to jail for it if it's a personal amount. And we'll talk about which drugs and what kind of personal amount in hour 2 in our Toker Talk Radio. But for now, that Measure 110 is groundbreaking because not only did it pass here in Oregon, it passed with a greater measure of support than legalization passed in the state of Oregon. The legalization of marijuana passed, and it passed with a greater degree of support than medical marijuana passed. I remember coming up in medical marijuana, and one of the talking points of our opponents, like Kevin Sabet, was always, well, first they're going to legalize weed. Next thing you know, they're going to want to legalize all drugs. And now that we've gone and stepped forward with the first measure to decriminalize drugs, and it passed with such a great margin, it pretty much blows the wind out of the sails of that one, doesn't it? And Oregon also passed Measure 109, a medicinal psilocybin program. We're talking the active psychoactive ingredient in magic mushrooms that give you the hallucinations and the feeling of contentment and oneness with nature and so forth in a clinical setting with an experienced therapist that can help guide you on your trip, let's say. The people's view of what drugs are, who uses drugs, and why they use them has radically shifted in this country. We're talking in a 1 decade span, we went from one state with legalization on the ballot, California, losing that legalization vote in California. That was 2010, all the way to 2020, where we have legalization passing in New Jersey, passing in Montana, passing in Arizona, and my God, it passed in South Dakota. South Dakota legalized marijuana before New York State. God, that's just unbelievable. And so this has been Kevin Sabet's worst election ever. He's got nothing to hang his hat on, folks. That 2010 election, of course, the Project Sam didn't exist at that point, but Kevin still probably felt that way back then. He could be so giddy that California failed to pass legalization. Then in 2012, we get legalization passed in Washington and Colorado for the first time in American history. 2 states legalized marijuana. But Oregon, my state, didn't. We were part of the Measure 80 campaign, and it just reached too far too fast, and it didn't pass. So at least Kevin Sabet could say, well, we beat him in hippy-dippy Oregon. So what do? We come back in 2014, and we passed legalization in Oregon and Alaska and Washington, D.C., but we did fail to get medical marijuana in Florida. Actually, we didn't fail. We got like 58% of the vote, I think it was, somewhere in the high 50s. But Florida's got this weird constitutional quirk that you got to get a 60% vote to amend the Constitution. So we didn't get that high of a support in 2014. So at least Kevin Sabet could say, hey, at least we stopped him in Florida. And go back to the donors and say, hey, we're doing our due diligence here. Then 2 years later, or 1 year later, 2015, everybody likes to forget this year, but in 2015, we had legalization on the ballot in Ohio, and it was a poorly conceived, badly marketed campaign that put a male superhero bud out there, which was odd since buds are female. Anyway, it was a terrible campaign, a terrible initiative, and it lost in 2015 pretty badly. I think it was a 2-1 loss in Ohio, and that must have really warmed the cockles of Kevin Sabet's heart. Then 2 years later, 2016, 2 years after the 2014, I should say. But in 2016, we had legalization almost sweep. We got California, Nevada, Maine, and Massachusetts. We got Florida medical. We got North Dakota medical. We got Arkansas medical. But we still had that loss in Arizona. It was a narrow loss, like 52-48, but he could still hang his hat. Well, at least we stopped him in Arizona. And then 2018, the marijuana election 2018, Michigan legalizes. And then you got Utah, Oklahoma, and Missouri joining medical marijuana. But at least Kevin could say, oh, well, legalization lost in North Dakota in 2018. And in between all that time, you have these legislatures. It's not even having to go to the ballot box. You got a legislature in Illinois legalizing marijuana. The huge state of Illinois, Chicago, legal marijuana. You got legislatures up in Vermont, finally, going along with a recreational sales scheme. But all along that way, he could find little places to hang his hat. Oh, we stopped it in New York. We stopped it in New York from passing. Oh, we stopped it in New Jersey. And these little press releases would come out. But after this election, we just had medical marijuana win by a 2-1 margin in South Dakota and Mississippi. After Mississippi forced him to get 2 votes for it. Unbelievable. And then we got legalization winning in South Dakota that didn't even have medical marijuana. South Dakota is going straight to legalization, and they're adding medical as well. We got legalization passed in New Jersey by a 2-1 margin. So what's he got to hang his hat on now? Absolutely nothing. This is my favorite thing. Unfortunately, he's blocked me on Twitter, so I can't, troll him on Twitter. So if you've got a Twitter account, I'd like you to reach out to @Kevin Sabet, Kevin, Kevin Sabet, Kevin Sabet, that's his handle, and just, congratulate him on the great work that Project Sam is doing, the fantastic results they got in the 2020 election. When they first started, I thought that maybe I should be afraid that they'd be scaring people, but given their recent track record of Project Sam, maybe I ought to start donating to them. right, well, that sound means that it's 4:20 here in the Mountain Time Zone. And you know that means we have to take our union-approved safety meeting. Be right back after these messages from our wonderful sponsors. And on to the marijuana costs argument.
Have you ever met that funny reefer man? Have you ever met that funny reefer man? Oh, he trades your dimes for nickels and he calls watermelon pickles. Yeah, I'm talking about the reefer man.
Almost busted in Laredo, but for reasons that I'd rather not disclose.
I smoke pot, and I like it a lot. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer to use than alcohol. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting responsible marijuana smokers in America. And to learn what you can do to help, please contact NORML at www.norml.org or call toll-free at 888-67-NORMAL.
The show was long and we was just sitting there, and we'd come to play and not just for the ride.
Midnight, July 1st, 2015, adult marijuana prohibition came to an end in Oregon. Immediately, over 400,000 adults who consume cannabis responsibly were no longer criminals. This is what freedom sounds like. Brought to you by Portland NORML.
Welcome back, 422 here in the Mountain Time Zone, coming to you live from beautiful legal Onionville in Tragic County, Oregon, right on the border of Mordor. And we're going to talk a little bit about Mordor here. That's my name for my home state of Idaho, where we've got two strains, got some and don't. Some of you know how it feels, right? So, Idaho now is America's last absolute prohibition state, right? So, and the way this works, right? So, like, let's run it down. Imagine that you're a person who wants to smoke a joint. You're over the age of 21. You're 21 and older, and you're in your house or at a friend's house, you know, somewhere in private, and you want to smoke a joint. And a cop knocks on your door, and you open the door, and there's that joint sitting in between your lips, smoking away. How many states now can you be in, and that cop can't do a damn thing? Well, it's now 15 states. We got legalization in Alaska, Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Montana, Colorado, Arizona, South Dakota, Illinois, Michigan, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. So 3 out of 10 states, 15 of these United States where 21 and older, joint in your hand, cop knocks on the door, ain't no thing. All right, well, let's suppose that you're a person that needs to smoke a joint because you're sick. You're sick, you got a verifiable condition. Let's say it's cancer, because that's the one that every state accepts, cancer. Well, how many states are there now in America where if you got cancer and a card, and you're smoking a joint, the cop comes, knocks on the door, it ain't no thing? Well, that's 36 states now. 36 states in which that's not going to be a big deal because you're a registered medical marijuana patient, or you're an adult in a legal state, because all those legal states are also medical marijuana states. Well, okay, what if You just want to use some CBD oil derived from a hemp plant, right? You're not even into pot, right? You're not even into marijuana, THC getting high. You just want, you heard about this CBD stuff and you heard it's be good for sleep or maybe helps with arthritis or, whatever, anxiety. You just want to try this stuff and it's derived from the hemp plant. And the federal government in 2018 passed the farm bill and said, hey, the stuff you derive from that hemp plant's just fine so long as it's, hemp, as long as it's below 0.3% THC. And we don't expect you to get all the THC out, but it's got to be so low that you couldn't possibly ever get high from it. You're one of those people. You got that little CBD tincture or maybe even some hemp flower, actual bud that's less than 0.3% THC to smoke. That cop knocks on your door. Where is it ain't no thing? 49 U.S. states. Every state in America allows the possession of low THC CBD products derived from the hemp plant, except Idaho. Idaho is America's last absolute prohibition state, where possession of anything with THC in it is marijuana. Anything with THC in it is marijuana. So when you get CBD in Idaho, it has to be 0% THC. You can only get it from like isolates. Now, I have some experience in this because during my 2.5-year hiatus, part of that has been to help to form a couple of CBD stores in the state of Idaho in support for the campaigns to legalize medical marijuana there. And when we order our CBD, we have to get certificates of authority, COAs, that show that a lab has tested this stuff and that it's 0% THC. Otherwise, whatever we're bringing in is marijuana. This is absolutely true. This is the strangest place in the world. Hemp is marijuana here. A year back, they had a tractor trailer, a semi-truck, coming through the state of Idaho on I-84, and the Idaho State Police pulled them over. And they found some 1,600 pounds or whatever it was of hemp in the back. And the state police, they crowed it. They proclaimed it from the highest mountaintop and on the loudest loudspeaker that it's the largest pot bust in state history. Hemp, a truckload of hemp. This state is America's not just last prohibition state, but it's America's most pot-hating state. No other state has gone to the extent Idaho has gone to express its displeasure at the thought of treating people who use marijuana like people who use alcohol. In 2013, the Idaho legislature was all freaked out because Washington and Colorado had just passed legalization. And everybody was banding about, well, where are the initiative states where we could pass medical? And of course, there's Idaho with the initiative power. So in 2013, the Idaho legislature passed this resolution to express its opposition to, quote, efforts to legalize marijuana for any purpose in the state of Idaho because drug legalization efforts have led to social, economic, and legal chaos, end quote. Yeah, reefer madness reigns supreme out here in the Gem State, folks. So 2013, you got the legislature, and it's a non-binding resolution. It's just really just them saying, we will never, ever legalize marijuana, ever, never, for no reason, no how. And in their resolution, there was a whole bunch of those whereas type clauses. And part of it was, whereas national drug legalization groups have targeted Idaho, right? So it was a shot across the bow to, reformers. So 2013, they're all upset about, marijuana. It's never going to be legalized for anybody for any reason. 2014 rolls around. In 2013, in late 2013, we had the Sanjay Gupta CNN special, Weed, where he renounced his opposition to medical marijuana because he'd been hanging out with Charlotte Figi, the little girl in Colorado who had such devastating seizures that were cured by a cannabis plant known as Charlotte's Web, a high CBD strain. And once that special, it was a groundbreaking special, once that took off and moms in middle America started seeing little epileptic kids being healed from seizures because of a cannabis plant variety that can't get you high. Once that started hitting 2014, the rush was on. Utah passes a CBD law. Utah, people, right south of Idaho. The headquarters of the Mormon church passes a CBD law, and then all these other states across the Midwest and the South follow suit. Like 14 states in the first year, I think it was, 17 by the second year. All these states start to pass these CBD oil laws, and with varying levels too. Most of them are the less than 0.3% THC, but some of them, like Georgia's, goes as high as 5% THC, as long as it's 15% CBD or something like that. So this wave rushes over America of all these local news stations showing moms and dads with their epileptic kids in the well of the state house, showing them having these kids seizing in the state house while they're, trying to wait to hear testimony, administering these oils to these kids and seeing them, heal almost immediately. Legislature after legislature after legislature passes these laws. Idaho's was no different. By 2015, 2 years after passing a resolution saying, oh my God, we'll never legalize marijuana, they said, well, okay, we'll legalize a little marijuana. And they passed a bipartisan support. They passed a law in Idaho to allow for the use of the low THC CBD oil. But then the drug lobby, the drug rehab lobby, and the law enforcement lobby in Idaho pull on the leash of then Governor Butch Otter, who vetoed CBD oil. Vetoed CBD oil, the only governor in history still to this day to have looked at seizing epileptic kids with his own eyes, taking a cannabis derivative that can't get them high, and say, no, I don't think so. In his veto statement, he cited he was worried that it would decrease public safety. Decrease public safety. Epileptic kids using non-psychoactive CBD oil would decrease public safety? Really? Now, you got to understand a little bit about Idaho, the state in which I grew up. In Idaho, it's perfectly legal to ride your motorcycle without a helmet. And the freeway speed on the western side of the state, the part of the freeway that people drive across all the time to come get their legal marijuana here in Onionville, is 80 miles an hour. So you can drive from Boise, Idaho to the dispensary, right, at 80 miles an hour on the freeway without a helmet. In between, on that route, there is an illegal fireworks store, big, right off the freeway, big old sign says fireworks, right? Now, what do I mean by an illegal fireworks store? Well, in Idaho, it's legal to buy any firework. However, it's only legal to shoot certain fireworks. Like you can't have any aerial, Roman candles, bottle rockets, things that fly. Those aren't legal to shoot off in the state of Idaho, but you can buy them. You can ride your motorcycle down the freeway at 80 miles an hour without a helmet to the illegal fireworks store, buy fireworks that you cannot shoot in that state, so long as you sign a little affidavit that says, I promise not to shoot them off in this state. You can ride back with your illegal fireworks on your motorcycle at 80 miles an hour without a helmet. And for fun, let's throw an AR-15 on your back. You can put an AR-15, locked and loaded AR-15, and Idaho has open carry, so you can just have that openly carried on your motorcycle, riding 80 miles an hour down the freeway without a helmet with your illegal fireworks in your backpack. And, by the way, there's no magazine round limits either. So you can have a barrel 100 round magazine on your AR-15 on your motorcycle at 80 miles an hour without a helmet. And you can take that AR-15 loaded into the state capitol. You can walk around in the state capitol with your loaded AR-15 100 round magazine. Nobody can do a thing about it. But we're worried about CBD oil and its effect on public safety. Give me a break. So this is, and of course, in Idaho farmers, though, I mean, they kind of know there's a crop here. They know that hemp is a great crop, not just for what you can get from hemp, but how hemp can work as a rotational crop for other crops. It remediates the soil. It's great for, an in-between crop. So the Idaho Senate went and passed a hemp bill, and it's just been sitting in the House since March. So Idaho still doesn't even have a hemp law. It was one of only 4 states after the hemp, the 2018 hemp bill passed, the federal bill that legalized hemp nationwide. It didn't legalize it in all the states, though. It just said hemp's legal if your state says it's legal. And so there were still 4 states that didn't have it. Idaho, South Dakota, Nebraska, and who was the other one? I can't remember. But the other 3 in the intervening time have passed state hemp laws. So now Idaho is the only state without a hemp law. Now, the THC used to be illegal in South Dakota as well. So we were down to the point where South Dakota and Idaho were the last 2 states. But of course, South Dakota now has legal marijuana and legal medical marijuana. Nebraska is still a tough state as far as that goes. But Nebraska has first possession decriminalization. So the first time you're caught, you can't get arrested. So Idaho is America's last absolute prohibition state. And Idaho's hemp bill, the one that's passed the Senate but still sitting in the House, it doesn't even remove hemp from the Controlled Substances Act in Idaho. So it's a hemp bill that still keeps hemp as a controlled substance. Isn't that crazy? And it doesn't legalize low THC CBD oil for medicinal use, even though everywhere else in the nation you can have that. Oh, it was Mississippi was the other state that didn't have a hemp law. It was South Dakota, Nebraska, and Mississippi that didn't have hemp laws. And South Dakota's passed, Nebraska's passed, and Mississippi now has a hemp law. Ironic that Mississippi didn't have a hemp law, given that it is the source of the federal government's one legal marijuana crop at the University of Mississippi. And so what I'm telling you is not only is Idaho America's last absolute prohibition state, it's North America's last absolute prohibition state, because Canada has legal weed and Mexico decriminalized personal use amounts and has legal hemp. We're literally like the only place on the continent. The state of Idaho is literally the only place on the continent where possession of a hemp leaf gets you a free ride in a cop car. It's just insane. And now that Montana has passed legalization, the state's just about surrounded. It's got Washington and Oregon on the west. It's got Montana on the east. It's got Nevada to the south. 80% of the population of Idaho now lives within a 1 or 2 hour drive. About half the population lives within a 1 hour drive, and about 80% live within a 2 hour drive of the border. And already the border pot shops here in Tragic County, right here in Onionville, we got like 5 or 6 shops that are doing $100,000, $120,000 of sales a day, bringing in $3,000 to $3,500 of tax revenue a day. Yeah. Who doesn't want to get a little bit of that tax revenue, huh? Pullman, Washington, Clarkston, Washington, Spokane, Washington, they've been bringing in the money at 37% tax rate from the state of Idaho. Jackpot, Nevada, just south of Twin Falls, little casino town on the border. They've decided to have a pot shop there. I don't think it's up yet, but Twin Falls is just 45 minutes away from Jackpot, Nevada. And now Montana. I identified 3 different border towns in Montana that would be a great place to set up a pot shop. Heron, Montana, up in the northwestern corner, and Monida, Montana, which is just over the border on I-15 as you're coming up north from Idaho Falls and Pocatello. And then my personal favorite, West Yellowstone, Montana. I actually lived in West Yellowstone, Montana as a little boy. All I can remember is snow higher than my face. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show. We're back live from beautiful Ontario, Oregon. I'm going to take a short break, get a little something to drink. Be right back after this.
You're You're tuned to the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
The Coffee Pot in Sumter, Oregon is your fast, friendly marijuana shop nestled in the beautiful Elkhorn Mountain Range outside of Baker City. We're serving Eastern Oregon and Idaho's Treasure Valley with the selection of flower, pre-rolls, vapes, dab, and edibles you need at the prices that make it well worth the drive. Don't venture to some well-watched parking lot in some border town dispensary just to take a number and wait in a long line for your cannabis products. Make the drive to the Coffee Pot in Sumter and deal one-on-one with your bud tender with no waiting. See, feel, and smell the products you're after and make your purchase knowing your tax dollars are helping a small tourist community that needs it. Plus, every dollar you spend is a point toward our Bong Bucks program that earns you coupons on glass and accessories. The Coffee Pot also honors our military, seniors, teachers, and first responders with a 10% discount. And as always, OMMP patients pay no 20% tax. Come on up to the Coffee Pot in Sumter, the first business on the left, on the side of the 2-story log cabin restaurant, and tell them Radical Russ sent you.
And now, another episode of Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre. I'm your host, Leonard Pinth-Garnell III. Tonight we take a look at one of the finest works in the cannabis cinema, 1996's Half-Baked, starring David Chappelle, as interpreted by the Royal Shakespearean Cannabis Theatre Company. In this scene, Chappelle's character, Thurgood Marshall, has just admitted his addiction to cannabis to a room full of narcotics addicts. One addict, played in the film by Robert Saget, and interpreted here by the Royal Company's Sir Frederick Farrach, takes umbrage at the suggestion.
I find preposterous the notion that you, sir, may be addicted to cannabis. In times previous, I have undertaken lubricious endeavours, most revolting and unbecoming of a proper gentleman, in my servitude to the wicked powder of the coca leaf. Lo, that is an addiction whose chains would bind Hercules. At any point in history, could one identify a moment in your life so sullied by your ignominy as a cannabis slave? Methinks not! Boo this man!
For Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre, I'm Leonard Pinth-Garnell III.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it, and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Well, after marijuana election night 2020, we now have 15 legal marijuana states in this nation and 36 medical marijuana states. It just makes you wonder, can the Democrats finally get behind legalization, please? I mean, it was bad enough that this election cycle, they had to go and nominate drug war Joe Biden, the man behind mandatory minimums, the man who created the drug czar's office, the man who wrote the crime bill that led to such great levels of mass incarceration, the architect of the 100-to-1 crack cocaine, powder cocaine disparity. I could go on, but if you were going to put a list of Democrats together and try to put someone on that list who would be the most odious pick for president you could imagine on my radar, Joe Biden. Yeah, I think Joe Biden would have been the number one person on that list. And yet, I found this election that I had to support him. I mean, the choice is between, fascism or Drug War Joe. I got to go with Drug War Joe. So here we are with Drug War Joe, and then Kamala Harris, the former Attorney General of California, who laughed when asked about the 2010 Prop 19 vote, laughed about marijuana legalization, or was that Prop 64? Prop 64, sorry. The California legalization vote in 2016, laughed in our faces about it. And yet we're forced to have to deal with them because Democrats and Republicans and this whole two-party system have got us in a situation where you got to choose, the lesser evil or greater evil. Now, I'm generally a supporter of Democrats. I just generally think they have the vision of supporting everyone in this nation, not just a certain few. Although I think they've been far too beholden to corporate interests since about 1980. Especially after the win of Bill Clinton, that new Democrat kind of coalition where they were, courting big Wall Street money and now big tech money. Be nice to have a party that stands for the people. And what the people have shown overwhelmingly is they want weed and mushrooms. Thank you, Dr. Amanda Ryman on Twitter for that one. The people want weed and mushrooms. Marijuana won with between 53% and 67% of the vote in 4 statewide elections this year. Didn't fail a single election. Marijuana in the 4 states that voted on it for legalization was far more popular than Joe Biden or Donald Trump in those states. Marijuana is very, maybe South Dakota voted more for Trump than it voted for legal marijuana. But the other 3. And yet, in September, there was a chance for the Democrats to put marijuana legalization front and center on the national stage and maybe, just maybe, gin up some more support for their tickets. It was the MORE Act. So we got 2 major pieces of federal legislation that we're hoping to get passed in the oncoming administration. We'll see what happens with the Senate. That's the Safe Banking Act and the MORE Act. Now, the Safe Banking Act is the one that would allow the existing states that have legal and medical marijuana businesses, it would allow those businesses to do banking. This is another thing that I have learned in my 2.5-year sabbatical is how insane it is to try to have an entire industry that you want to claim to be tracked seed to sale. You're going to track the marijuana seed to sale, but it's going to be an all cash business. Okay. So we have to do things for our coffee pot dispensary up in Sumter, Oregon. We have to go like to the post office and buy money orders in $500 increments to pay our taxes. You have to pay cash to buy supplies and such. It's just untenable. And so the Safe Banking Act would allow us to have bank accounts and credit cards and apply for loans and all the stuff that banking provides to business. And it's passed the House. But it doesn't get any hearing in the Senate because the Republicans control the Senate and Mitch McConnell won't let that stuff move. So the other bill that we're talking about is the MORE Act, the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement, I think is the acronym. This one would remove marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act of the federal government. Kind of like the Farm Bill, it doesn't make it legal in all the states. It does allow the states to make it legal, right? So taking it off the Controlled Substances Act just means the federal government, hey, not our business. And then the state, if Idaho still wants to be regressive and, throw people in jail for hemp plants, it could. So this MORE Act does that and provides a pathway for expungement of prior marijuana records that would no longer be crimes, right? Great support among Democrats for this, and a large degree of support from independents and even Republicans on these things. We saw Republicans get behind the First Step Act this year, and Donald Trump actually signed it. Was it last year or this year? The time, how it's flown. But whatever, that First Step Act that started to provide ways of overcoming the worst aspects of mass incarceration. So it's not as if Republicans aren't getting on board with this stuff. But the centrist, moderate Democrats in the House and their octogenarian leadership decided that no, we don't want to have a vote on the MORE Act. No. This was September, folks. In September, there was a chance to vote on the MORE Act. The Democratic House could have passed the MORE Act, sent it to the Senate, been able to tell Democrats out there, tell young people that we voted to legalize marijuana. And if you give us control of the Senate, that will happen. And they punted. The moderates were afraid. Oh, don't run us so far to the left. Oh no, we don't want to come out in favor of marijuana legalization that 3/4 of Democrats support, 2/3 of independent support, and 1/2 of Republican support. No. We don't want to get out in front of an issue that everybody supports. No, we wouldn't want to do that. That could hurt us in swing districts. Ooh, we're scared. And they retreated right to Democrats' cave. That was September, folks. And then what happens in November? Every marijuana initiative on the ballot passes by an overwhelming margin, and Oregon decriminalizes all drugs and legalizes medicinal psilocybin. And Washington, D.C. decriminalizes all entheogenic plants and fungi. Democrats just like to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, and now we're in a situation where, yeah, it's looking increasingly likely that Joe Biden's going to be the president, but it's also looking as if the Senate is going to be a 50-50 tie if Democrats can win two runoff elections in Georgia. That's all. Democrats just have to win 2 Senate elections in Georgia. That gets a 50-50 tie in the Senate, and a 50-50 tie would be broken by the president of the Senate, which of course is the vice president of the United States, which will be Kamala Harris. But a 50-50 tie, when you have Democrats in the Senate like Joe Manchin, who are, in solidly conservative states like West Virginia, a 50-50 tie isn't much power for the Democrats to go on. But could it be enough to get the MORE Act passed? At least it could get a vote under that scenario with Chuck Schumer as the majority leader. Or how does it work when it's 50-50? Do they share the leadership position? At least I think it could get a vote that way. But Democrats are terrified to get in front of this issue. And I wish someone could, they've got to see the polls. They got to see the numbers. They're looking at the same stuff as I'm looking at. Imagine that you're going to go forward in Georgia trying to bring out as many voters as you can in Atlanta and Athens, and being able to say that, hey, you elect these 2 Democrats to the Senate, marijuana becomes legal nationally. But no, we've got to run away from that. And they're still doing it today, the Democrats. In September, they were afraid to get in front of marijuana legalization. Now, they're just afraid to go left in general. Story is out of Politico. And it says, Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her top lieutenants had a stark warning for Democrats today. Swing too far left, and they're all but certain to blow their chances in the Georgia runoff that will determine which party controls the Senate. Don't swing too far left. And again, marijuana, a left position, won. Medicare for all, there was an exit poll. Now, understand, the exit polling this year was a little bit skewed because Democrats said, hey, you know what? We're in a pandemic. Maybe you ought to mail in your ballot. Maybe not, congregate. And Republicans said, oh, masks are a hoax and mail-in voting's a fraud. Everybody stand in line and vote in person. So the exit polls probably skew more toward the Trump voter because they're the ones that were going for the election day voting when the polls were being taken. But I saw a chyron of an election poll on Fox News that showed overwhelming support for a government-run healthcare program, for a Medicare for all type of system. But no, not the Democrats, man. They gotta run away from Medicare for all. Joe Biden has to go on the campaign trail and say, "Oh, I'm not a socialist. We're not going to do socialism. That's socialist medicine. We're not going to do socialism. We're just going to tweak the Obamacare that's leaving 11 million of you uninsured. We'll just tweak that a little bit. We'll just tweak that Obamacare that gives you premiums that are pretty high and versus premiums that used to be really high. Well, we'll just fix things just a little. That'll motivate people, right? Let's not try too hard. Go to the moon in a decade. Gee, Mr. Kennedy, no, that's way too ambitious. Could we maybe just set up a little dish on a mountaintop somewhere? Going to the moon, gosh, that's way too much. That's what today's Democrats would have been like in 1960, telling John Kennedy not to aim for the moon. And they wonder why 100 million people don't vote. They wonder why, after 4 years of the worst human being to ever walk the face of the earth being our president, after 250,000 people dead, an economy in shambles, the pandering to racists and dictators, after all that it's still close. They wonder. I had one of my Twitter followers, Eros Morales, at CC Barimba, he replied to me too. Like, if you were Bloomberg, former Mayor Bloomberg, the billionaire, if you were Bloomberg spending $100 million in Florida, wouldn't you make sure that every poor black soul was having to rake mailers off his front lawn about how there was a $15 minimum wage referendum on the ballot? Very good point. Again, Democrats run away from the policies that people are supporting. Florida passed that $15 minimum wage. Have you heard much from Joe Biden about that? I know he supports it, but it's not like it's front and center because he's afraid, oh no, I don't want people to think I'm a socialist is going to give people money and stuff. Gosh, they might spend it and revitalize the economy. But I'll tell you, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wasn't having any of this Politico story. You know, this don't go too far left, we'll lose the Georgia Senate elections. She notes that, first of all, the House lost 10 seats, right? After all this, after the Republicans blowing COVID relief, you know, handing money hand over fist to corporations while people are getting evicted, not extending unemployment insurance, blowing the response to a pandemic that kills 250,000 people. After all that, Democrats lost seats in the House. Republicans picked up 10 seats. And those 10 seats they picked up, they weren't the progressive people's seats, they were the moderates. The people that died, first of all, they had lousy they had lousy ground game campaigning, lousy digital, underinvestment on that. But also these swing seat Democrats, the incumbents, the ones that co-sponsored the Green New Deal, the ones that co-sponsored Medicare for All, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez notes that every single one of them won re-election. See, I think that what has happened to America since Ronald Reagan has been, you know, Reagan's things, the 9 worst words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. And people have been, for a generation now, have been taught to think of the government as a bad thing that's an adversary. It's a bad thing that's an adversary that's trying to harm you, instead of the collective action of all of us trying to help all of us. So this argument that the Democrats shouldn't go farther left, folks, when we've got a whole generation that's grown up thinking that government is only there to hurt them and take from them and harm them, and one side puts together a populist like Trump who says, oh, I'm going to make your world great. I'm going to make America great again. They'll take the word of the liar who says he's going to help them over the word of the people that say, well, we can't help you that much. Oh, Medicare for all, gosh, that's too much. Green New Deal, oh, wait, that's way overreach. Gosh, Rudy, $15 minimum wage. Well, maybe in some places, but golly. Well, who's going to take the half measures, even if they're honest? I mean, the Democrats may be being honest about this. We're being honest about what's possible and what we can get past. But who wants to hear these half measures when they're, you know, in a pandemic, when they're unemployed, when they're being foreclosed on and losing their car? They don't want to hear, oh, well, maybe we can possibly tweak Obamacare a little. So when the Democrats offer half measures and Republicans offer full-blown lies, too many people turn to the one that's given them at least some hope, at least some full-blown lie hope that something's going to change someday. So come on, Democrats. Take a look at the results of this election and how marijuana and drug policy reform swept both red and blue states. Mississippi is a medical marijuana state now. You can stop being afraid of your shadow and start being pro-marijuana legalization. I'm Radical Russ. Stay tuned. Hour 2 is next.
You grow it, you try it,